Hello everyone! As I'm sure you can guess from the title of this video, this is going to be my most used art supplies. I'm going to be covering everything from what I sketch with, to my main watercolor paints, my colored pencils, and even the tools I mainly use. Before we get started with the art supplies, I just wanted to mention that everything I show in this video will be listed very specifically in the description box in order by category. So if you're interested in a particular product, definitely check out the description box and its super specific title will be listed there if I don't mention it as specifically as I maybe should have. So let's get straight on into the materials. Let's start off with sketch tools. The first thing that I use is a 2H pencil. If I'm doing any watercolor paintings or really just anything, I always use a 2H pencil because it's not as dark as an HB pencil, but you can still easily see the lines. So that is my preferred hardness of pencil. This one is the kind that I've been using lately. It's a Tombow Mono 2H pencil. I have used the Staedtler ones and just any 2H pencil. The main reason I bought these ones is because you can buy the 2H's together in a set of 12 instead of individually, so that definitely saves money, especially because I go through them a lot, and I sharpen them with an X-Acto knife. So that's why it has a crazy point at the end. The next pencils, which I don't use as frequently as the 2H, but I do definitely still use them quite a bit, are the Graphgear 1000 by Pentel. These are in the three different sizes they come in. We have the 0.3mm lead size, the 0.5, and the 0.7. These are super nicely weighted, and they feel great to draw with. They have this super cool function. As you can see, when you put the lead out, you can retract it by pressing that clip. I mainly am using the 0.3 for detail work, but the 0.5 and 0.7 definitely get their uses as well. And you can actually change what lead you have in them. So see, on the handle you can flip it to say what lead you have in the pencil currently. So the 0.3mm is 2H for me right now, but the other ones are just standard HB leads. Next, let's talk about erasers. When I'm drawing, I normally grab my pencil and then these four erasers. The first one is the Tombow Mono 0. It is a super fine, in fact, it's 0.23mm fine eraser, which is what I use for any detail work. It's fantastic for that. Then I have just a generic Kneaded eraser. I'm not sure what brand this is. It's just, it's a Kneaded eraser. Any Kneaded eraser will work. And then a Pentel Clic eraser. This one, again, it's a medium size eraser that I use if I'm not erasing anything too big or too small. And then finally, my all-time favorite eraser, the MOO Professional. Now, this one, as you can see, is pretty well loved. Normally, it comes in a box like this, and it is this big, as you can see. Well loved. But yes, this eraser can erase just about anything and leaves almost no lead behind. So this is by far my favorite eraser, but these ones definitely come in handy as well when I'm sketching. And there you have my main sketching tools. Next, let's talk about tools. My first most used tool is this Mitsubishi KH20 pencil sharpener. It is the greatest pencil sharpener I have ever found. It works fantastically for colored pencils. You can adjust whether you want them sharper, like pointier, or more dull. There, it comes out and grabs the pencil, and it's a hand crank. So it doesn't make a super lot of noise, which is great. But yes, greatest pencil sharpener I've ever found. The next thing I use all the time, which I don't think you've ever really seen, are these Artograph PadPucks. They are normally meant to prop up a light box for tracing or drawing. As you can see, there are 4 of them, but they stack up. And what you can do for these, well, what I use them for all the time, is propping up drawings so that they're angled and at a better angle for me when I'm drawing. They're basically the most portable easel in the world. And also, of course, one of the less expensive options, because if you've ever looked at easels, they can get pretty pricey really fast. So yes, these of course are also great for propping up a light pad, like a light box if you want, but they're made out of rubber, so whatever you're drawing on isn't going to slip off of them. But yes, I use these constantly when I'm sketching, and I don't know what I would do without them anymore. The next thing I'm sure you've seen me talk or heard me talk about a lot is my smudge glove. This is the Smudge Guard brand smudge glove. It is the 2-finger one in black. I use this all the time if I am sketching something that has lots of pencil and I'm worried about smudging it all over the place. Or using colored pencil, but I also use this all the time on my Cintiq tablet and my iPad because it cuts down the friction and so your hand glides across the screen really easily. But I'm sure you've heard enough of this by now, but if you're into digital art or worried or having problems with smudging, definitely get yourself a smudge glove. Next on the list is transfer paper. This is basically a thin paper that is covered with charcoal on one side of it. As you can see, I've used this one quite a bit. You can see my drawings on it. But I use this all the time for larger drawings, if I'm having to transfer them on a wood plaque or a canvas or something, or if I have all of these separate pattern elements that I need to add to a particular drawing and I want it to be super clean, that's where this comes in. This is just the standard graphite color, but as you can see, it comes in a bunch of different colors, and it is extremely useful when I need it. It's not something I use every single drawing, but when I do use it, it's definitely the most useful tool around then. Next is kind of boring and basic, but drawing clips. I use these in watercolor sketchbooks to hold the paper down instead of tape. I also would use it with the transfer paper to keep it in place, but they're just a super basic but really helpful tool to keep around your studio. As you can see, they come in a bunch of different sizes. Super basic, but super useful when you need them. Next is one of my absolute favorite things, swatch sheets. If you have not swatched your paints or your pencil crayons and made a master key, do it right now. They will save you so much in the future. These two are my Daniel Smith watercolor charts. These are the ones that you can buy, and I've just turned them into my swatch sheets. So the paint colors, I don't have all of these paint colors, but the ones that I have put a little mark beside them. But it also is useful because when I want to go add a color, I can just go to this sheet and see the exact color of that paint. So if I realize I am missing a color and I don't want to keep mixing it up, I go to this sheet and I scope out what the closest color would be. So yes, these ones are extremely useful and ones that you can easily do yourself because you buy them. But I also have swatch sheets for all of my colored pencils. This one is the Derwent Color Soft ones, and then this is my Prismacolor markers. So as you can see, I have swatched the ones that I own. My other colored pencil swatch sheets are in my colored pencil cases. I also even swatched my Crayola colored pencils when I was doing my Crayola challenge video because I'm so used to using swatch sheets, and it's so much easier, especially for the Crayola colors, because the wood on the pencil does not match half of the time what the actual color is. So being able to look at a swatch sheet and figuring out what colors you need and grabbing those colors saves you so much time and worry when you're not sure if the color is going to come out as the color it looks like. Now let's talk about more watercolor type tools. The first thing is the water container I use all the time, which is actually technically a brush cleaner. This one is a brand new one, but it is an accordion style portable container, so you can just open it up like this to be as big as you want, or collapse it obviously if you want to actually travel with it. But yes, this is what I fill up with water all the time. It has a brush cleaner in the bottom, so that's how I keep my brushes super pristine, because I can just clean them right away. I need some water, need to get rid of the color. It also, of course, because it is cleaning your brush, helps to clean out the brush from excess color, so you're not mixing colors. But yes, that is the water container I use all the time. It's also helpful because I know lots of artists end up using mugs and stuff and then accidentally end up going to try and grab the mug because they think it's their coffee or whatever. So this saves me from trying to drink the paint and water, and also keeps my brushes super clean. The next two things are super specific, but they are also a very unique product. And these are the watercolor ground. If you don't know, watercolor ground is basically gesso, but for watercolor. So I have used these quite a few times on wood panels to be able to make them basically water absorbent. So this is kind of like liquid watercolor paper. They are kind of goopy. As you can see, it's kind of like a thicker paste type consistency. These ones are the Daniel Smith watercolor grounds, but I'm sure there are other brands that make them as well. This one's transparent, this one is black. I've used this in a video to make the background black, but it's also been great to have iridescent watercolors show up on it. It also comes in white, which I have a jar of too, but I thought I'd just bring these two to show you. But yes, watercolor ground, when I need it, is amazingly helpful. Sticking with the watercolor theme, I have these Masonite boards. Now this is what I tape my watercolor paper to all of the time to stop it from warping. So pretty standard. I have these in a bunch of different sizes. But yeah, Masonite boards, use them basically every time I do a watercolor painting. And sticking with the Masonite board idea, the tape that I use to tape the watercolor paper down to the Masonite board is the 3M blue painter's tape. As you can see, these are in pretty thick sizes. This one I believe is 1.5 inches and this one is 2 inches or 2.5 inches. I normally am using the 1.5 inch one, but if it is a bigger painting that I really don't want to warp or I'm worried about the water tension pulling the tape up, I'll use the thicker stuff. But yeah, this is the masking tape I use all the time for watercolor paintings. And of course, we couldn't have a tools section part of the video without talking about watercolor brushes. These are the brands that I use the most. This one in particular is one of my most used brushes. So this is the Winsor Newton Cotman line, but this one in particular is the designer's brush in size 0. The designer's line from Winsor Newton is one of my favorite because the brush hairs are longer than a standard round brush, but shorter than a script brush. So it holds more water than a thin round brush, but it's not as flimsy as a script brush. So they're great for detail. The next brand that I use a lot are these Royal & Langnickel soft grip brushes. They're not technically marketed as watercolor brushes, but they work great. I have these in a bunch of different sizes, and they also come in different shapes. This is of course a round one in size 8, but they also make flat brushes and fan brushes. And last but not least, I use these Princeton Neptune brushes possibly the most. This one is in size 10, but I have pretty much an entire set of them. These also come in round and flat, although the flat brushes have green handles. The only other brush that I use pretty regularly is a standard toothbrush, which of course is normally used for splattering stars on galaxy paintings. But of course you could also use this for splattering normal paint as well. Those are my 3 main brush lines. I have lots of different sizes in each brand, so normally they are the 3 types of brushes you will see me using in videos. And we can't be talking about watercolor tools without talking about masking fluid. This is the brand I use all the time. It's the Winsor Newton Colorless masking fluid. And if you don't know, masking fluid basically creates a barrier between the page and the paint. So it's kind of like glue, but it's easily removable. So that is the masking fluid, but with the masking fluid, I normally use it with this particular bottle. This, I believe, is meant for henna tattooing, but it is an extremely small nozzle, so it's very easy to get into details with the masking fluid. I just fill this bottle up with masking fluid and then paint away. Also with the masking fluid, I will use these tools. This is the Incredible nib. It has two, I'm not even sure what these ends are made out of, but it has a pointier end to be able to apply masking fluid and an angled end. If you use masking fluid with a brush, you will destroy it. So using a specific tool that is easily cleanable is the way to go. This tool is called a color shaper. I'm not actually sure if it is meant to be used with masking fluid. It has a rubber type silicone end, which again is very easy to clean masking fluid off of. But in regards to removing masking fluid, one of my favorite things to use is this eraser. I'm pretty sure this is called a masking fluid eraser, but if not, again, it will be listed in the description box as to what it's actually called. But it is this extremely strange texture, and it picks up masking fluid super easily. So if you have a bunch of small parts, and it's just going to take you forever to kind of peel them off, definitely pick yourself up one of these because it will save you a lot of time and effort. That is the masking fluid pack. And last but not least, in the tool department, we have the finishing sprays I use all of the time. This is how I finish off the artwork, and even with this one, sometimes spray it in between. But it is the Krylon Gallery Series Fine Art Fixative and the Krylon Gallery Series UV Archival Varnish. So let's talk about the Fine Art Fixative first. This I will use for more smudge type artworks, but you can also use this in between your artwork as well, so while you're still working on it. I've used this when I have used pastel in artwork to stop it from smudging, so once I've finished with the pastel, I will spray it with this so I don't get pastel all over me. But I will also finish off artworks with this as well that are more smudge type artworks, so colored pencil, pastel, any of that stuff, I will generally use this as opposed to the other one, which is the UV Archival Varnish. They both have sealant properties. This one, as you can tell, is meant to be protective against UV rays, so any original paintings that I sell get sprayed with this. Any paintings that I'm displaying for myself get sprayed with this. But yeah, it is archival quality, so it will not yellow. It will stop dust from harming the artwork. It's great. These are the two sprays I use all of the time. And that's everything for my most used tools. Next, let's talk about paper. The first paper that I use most of the time is watercolor paper. Now, I'm not super brand loyal, so this is just the different types that I use most of the time. The first one is the Canson XL watercolor paper. I have this kind in a bunch of different sizes, and it's kind of the one that you will see me use most often, just because I have the most of it. But other than that, it's great watercolor paper, it's easy to get, and it's fairly inexpensive. Now these two are kind of go together. These two are both hot pressed watercolor papers. The other one was cold pressed, but these two are hot pressed. It just is a different finish. The watercolor reacts differently on hot pressed paper. They're both by Fabriano. This one is the Studio watercolor. Again, I have this one in a couple of sizes. And this is the Artistico Extra White that is in hot pressed. This one is a watercolor block that is a painting I apparently have not painted yet. But yeah, I really like this stuff too, and I have the hot pressed of this particular one in a bunch of different sizes, so generally if I am using hot pressed watercolor paper, it's this type. Another watercolor paper I like using a lot is the Canson Montval watercolor paper. Again, I have this in a couple of different sizes, although the sizes are a little strange. but that's also a benefit. So if I want something that's pretty wide like this one or pretty extra long, I will go and grab this one. Obviously you can cut watercolor paper yourself, but it's much easier if you already have that in the right size. And the last kind I use all the time is the fluid watercolor paper. If you see me painting something that is a square, it's most likely this. Again, this is an art block, so I don't need to remove it from the pad. It's already attached to itself to help from warping, but this is what I use mainly for all of my Art Nouveau type artwork. In regards to non-watercolor paper, the only ones that I really use for colored pencils most of the time are the toned papers from Strathmore. As you can see, I have tone gray and tone tan. Again, this is what I'm using mainly for colored pencil. I really don't ever draw with colored pencil on white paper anymore, and so when you see the toned paper, it's this stuff. As you see, tan and gray. This is actually the newer type, so it's a lot thicker than the old type, and I much prefer this one because if you have a full drawing with colored pencil, the wax can start to peel the edges up, but with this, it's a lot thicker, so that's not a problem anymore. The next is not exactly paper, but I do use it to draw on. It is wood plaques and panels. I have, again, these in a bunch of different sizes and wood colors. Some are more decorative, like these oval ones I like to use a lot. I have ones that are more embellished edges and some laser cut ones even. But yeah, they are what I use for panels. There aren't a particular type of wood. I'm normally using these for colored pencil again because I like to see the wood grain. But I have used watercolor on wood as well. And they are my most used paper and drawing surfaces. Next, drawing supplies. The first thing in regards to drawing supplies that I want to talk about are these acrylic inks. Now, these acrylic inks also go with these dip pens that I use all the time. So these are pretty standard. You know, I don't really have a specific nib that I really like to use. These are just the two that I'm not even sure what type they are that I like to use the most. This one, of course, is a bit more of a flat edge, so it creates a much thicker line than this one, but I'm normally using this one to ink all of the time. And I believe both of these are on Speedball nib holders. But other than that, the ink that I use all of the time is the Daler Rowney FW acrylic ink. I have these in a bunch of colors, but these are the 4 colors I use the most. It's indigo, black, white, and sepia. Acrylic ink is waterproof, so this is what I normally use for watercolor paintings, and I just like the look of a dip pen with ink. Other inking tools that I use are the Prismacolor fine line markers and the Copic multi-liners. I don't really have a preference between these two. I think they basically work about the same for me, but I use both of them kind of intermittently, whatever I'm feeling that day. Other pens that I use for inking are just standard ballpoint pens. These are the super cheap Bic ones. The cheaper the better when it comes to ballpoint pens. And if you didn't know, ballpoint pens are actually waterproof once the ink has set. So these are perfectly safe to use for watercolor sketches, and I just like the look sometimes of ballpoint pens as opposed to anything else, because with the super cheap ones you can actually get a variant in ink opacity. So you can easily sketch it out and have lighter lines, or fully go in and have nice dark bold lines. Other pens that I use all the time are white gel pens, of course. I'm sure if you've watched any of my YouTube videos you will see the white gel pen come out at some point. My all-time favorite white gel pen is the Uniball Signo Broad White pen, but I also use the Sakura Jelly Roll in white. Still quite a bit, but it isn't as pigmented as the Uniball one. Now, as far as colored pencils go, the two that I use all of the time are the Prismacolor Premier Colored Pencils and the Polychromos by Faber-Castell. I would say that Polychromos are my all-time favorite, but I almost never use one without the other. I almost always use both of them at the same time for drawings. But the Prismacolor, there are 150 colors. The Polychromos, there are 120. These are both complete sets that I've just put into these pencil cases so that I can see all of the colors at the same time. But yes, these are my two top colored pencils that when you see me using colored pencils, it will always be these two. And that's it for my most used drawing supplies. And last but not least, my most used paint. As I'm sure you can tell by now, I'm primarily a watercolor artist, and this is my main watercolor palette. It is a super custom palette, so I'm going to talk you through it. But it is what I use in basically every video unless I'm doing some sort of challenge or specific paint type video. So down here we have the Winsor Newton Cotman watercolor set that is the 48 pan set. Now for these colors I've made a few adjustments to them. So 95% of these colors come in the 48 Cotman set, but I've added Naples yellow. I changed out the sepia to the Winsor Newton professional version of that. I have a maroon color that I'm not sure what color it's called. I flipped out the indigo that was in the Cotman set to a Winsor Newton professional version. But other than that, it is exactly what comes in the palette. And they are my most used watercolors. Now up here, we have my super customized palette, which this top row is all Winsor Newton professional paints. I'm not going to list off the specific colors because I'm not even sure what they are unless I take them all out. But they're all Winsor Newton professional colors. These two are the replacements for the sepia, and like they're the original Winsor Newton Cotman colors that were the sepia and the indigo. I still use them when I don't want something super pigmented, but they're living up there now because generally I want them to be the more pigmented version. And then these ones and all of these ones are all Daniel Smith colors. Now these bigger pans are also Daniel Smith. They are just the colors that I use the most. So this is my main watercolor palette that I use in every video. Speaking along the lines of Daniel Smith, this container has all of the iridescent and metallic colors that I don't keep in pans because there's so many of them that I would just have a million pans that I don't have room for, and I don't use them that often, so I don't mind digging through here and squeezing some of the watercolor out on a palette to use when I need it. Also in the vein of metallic colors, I use these Finetec watercolor palettes all of the time too for metallic. This is the gold set, and this is just the pearlescent set. They are more cake type pans, and they're actually kind of meant for calligraphy. Like lots of people use them for calligraphy purposes, but they are some of the most pigmented metallic watercolors I've ever found. Like I prefer these golds over the Daniel Smith ones. So those are the Finetec metallic and pearlescent watercolor sets. The other paint that I use all of the time is this Winsor & Newton gouache. This one is in permanent white because, as I'm sure you know, watercolor is translucent and gouache is more opaque, although it works kind of like watercolor. So if I want to lighten any areas up or add highlights, this is the gouache that I use if I don't want to use one of the white gel pens. If I want to use something even more opaque than the gouache, I use this golden acrylic titanium white paint. Now this stuff is super opaque, which works great when I need it, but I definitely don't use it all the time. And there we have all of my most used paint. And that's everything for my most used art supplies. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.